I've started the recording already, 2 minutes into the meeting. One more minute to go.
Nancy, have you joined in from the Gabbys account or your account?
I think it's my own account. I don't remember.
Okay, I'm just making you the host for a second. I'll just drop off and join in from the Gabbys account.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Sourav.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Morning,
Suresh.
Sourav.
Good morning, DTM Naveen.
Good morning.
Morning, Sourav.
Welcome.
Thanks for inviting me.
Good morning.
Good morning, Suresh. Good morning, Naveen. Good morning, Anand, Manjula, Abdul. Hi, good morning. Welcome to
Good
the
morning.
Welcome, Toastmaster Nandan, Toastmaster Anand. Welcome all the Gabbys Toastmasters.
Thank you.
Welcome, distinguished Toastmaster Veera Manu.
It's 10 a.m. Felix, Natalis, we are on day 4 of the month-long birthday celebrations for the Gabbys Toastmasters Club, which, by the way, are on in full swing. I'm your Sergeant at Arms, Ritu George. Club President, distinguished Toastmasters, our esteemed panelists, fellow Toastmasters, and valued guests. Big hello, good morning, and a warm welcome to the 50th meeting of the Gabbys Toastmasters Club. A round of applause as we complete today a half-century of meetings. And it gives me immense pride as we host yet another stimulating and insightful panel discussion today on inclusive leadership. The meeting is scheduled to last for 2 hours. But before we start this much awaited session, like all other meetings, I will highlight some key points. Request you all to keep your videos on throughout the session to make it appear like a live audience in a meeting room. And to minimize disruptions, request you all to keep yourselves mute throughout the session. The chats have been disabled for the meeting. However, if you have a question for our panelists, you have an option to message the moderator directly. Regarding the topics of sex, religion, and politics, even though Toastmasters International does not put any restrictions on speaking on these topics, at the Gabbys TMC, however, we request all speakers and role takers to be mindful and responsible and abstain from expressing any controversial views on these sensitive topics. Also, urge you to be cognizant of the fact that we as a club practice diversity and inclusion in letter and in spirit. Hence, ensure there are no sexist, racist, or any such undertones which create hostility and discomfort for members or guests. Moving on, let me now call upon the presiding officer for the meeting. She's a certified image and personal branding coach with a mission to positively influence millions of lives. She's taken up the role of Area Director for Area E2, District 92. She is an immediate past president and vice president membership of the Gabbys Toastmasters Club. Personally, I'm quite impressed with her as I see her as a promising young leader who exhibits a great deal of maturity and clarity in her thinking. And when asked about diversity and inclusion, she says, diversity and inclusion are not about treating someone differently. I don't want to be treated differently just because I'm a female. Just accept me as a part of the spectrum of normalcy. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the presiding officer of the meeting, Toastmaster Nancy Goyal. Over to you.
Thank you, Toastmaster Ritu, for your kind words. One and all, that was our Toastmaster Ritu, our Sergeant at Arms. A huge round of applause for her at least. On the 25th November 2020, I remember very clearly that I was the president of the Gabbys Toastmaster Club, and we were having the ExCom meeting then. During that meeting, we were talking about the health of our club in terms of diversity. Then a realization dawned upon us as we define diversity as binary, male or female. And that's not the true diversity at all. That is the time we decided we will reach out to the world, educate the world, and tell the world that our definition of diversity is much bigger and diverse. And that's how we started thinking right on these lines. I would like to thank our community partner, the Women's Web team, for supporting us in promoting the event as allies. And it's an absolute pleasure for me in welcoming all our esteemed guests for the 50th meeting. One very key aspect of diversity is global diversity. The world is limitless, it's boundaryless place. One such globally diverse, boundaryless world was created by Dr. Rolf C. Smedley in 1924 by the name of Toastmasters Club. Toastmasters, you are the proof that where you and I are sitting, it's a home to 300,000 members as part of 16,000 plus clubs across 100 plus countries. Isn't that diverse? And at the Gabbys, we have been practicing global diversity with extreme passion and conviction. We have never restricted ourselves to the boundaries of the club. Since the time we are chartered in September 2020, we have gone all across the countries, invited Toastmasters to our club. We have given speeches in different areas, divisions, districts, and regions. Most of you are also joining from different regions here. I welcome you all. And the result of all of this is this. Today is the 50th meeting of the Gabbys. And what did we achieve? We achieved 8 pathbreakers, more than 10 Triple Crown Award winners, club awards like Golden Gavel, Grand Slam for mentors. We have had members winning division contest, area contest, and we have been the only chartered President's Distinguished Club in the year 2020-2021. What about this year? You might be wondering. It's less than 2 months, and we have already achieved 7 DCP points on the board and 21 renewals for the October to March cycle. Another 2 points are being baked over the weekend. So even before we turn an year old, we will have 9 DCP points in our kitty. Thanks to all the Gabbys for this and our alliances, the associate Toastmasters with us. I think we need to set some challenging targets on our own for the rest of the year. We need to keep ourselves working, right? Anyway, without further ado, I call this meeting to order. It's time for me to introduce our Master of Ceremony. She is the VP of the Gabbys Toastmaster Club. She is an entrepreneur, a coach, and an ally. She is the co-founder of an edtech company, Somatus, which aims at facilitating social emotional learning. She is also a hardcore egalitarian who believes that only a mindset on equity can truly grow. And she is none other than our Toastmaster, Aparna. Toastmaster Aparna, over to you.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome, Presiding Officer Toastmaster Nancy, and a very warm welcome to one and all present here. Good morning, Toastmasters, guests, panelists, and everyone out there. What a day. I've been waiting for this day with bated breath for almost 2 months. From the time we decided to have such an event, we've all been waiting. And boy, I can't believe it's finally here. And I'm glad we are here. We are at a point where we can talk about these things out in the open. Like I say, if not now, when? If not here, where? With that, let's get that started. A quick info. The meeting, the panel discussion, will consist of 4 panelists, and the discussion itself would be for about 60 minutes. And after that, we would have 30 minutes of Q&As. We've already received quite a few questions, and we will be opening up for Q&A with the audience present here. And just to keep the meeting on track, I also have my wonderful timer here with me, my VP PR, Toastmaster Lakshmi. She's also the one responsible for all those beautiful posters that you all see around all our Gabbys events. Thank you very much for that, Toastmaster Lakshmi. So let's get started. Toastmasters is where we learn to use our voice to become better speakers, better professionals, but more importantly, better leaders. And leadership, that's all about people. It is our ability to lead each and everyone in our sphere of influence without differentiation, but with complete inclusion. However, when we say inclusion, it's quite unfortunate that our knowledge about it, we are barely conversant about what this is, inclusion. When I say inclusion, most people say, oh, it is about gender inclusion. And they think there are only about 2, at the most 3 genders. But in reality, there are much more. And then what is the difference between gender and sexuality? Well, if you don't know these matters, how are we going to respect the identity of the people we lead as leaders? Can we really be great leaders? Absolutely not. So discussions like these, forums like these, where we can have dialogues around these topics and subjects out in the open are of paramount importance. And so at the Gabbys, we put our brains together, we put our heart and soul and everything together to bring you all some of the finest people that can enlighten us on these matters. Now, inclusion is a vast ocean. There are so many topics. Even if we spoke about it for 90 minutes, we barely scratched the surface. So today, we are limiting our discussion to inclusion specifically to the LGBTQI+ community. The lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersexual, asexual, and every single person who falls anywhere in this spectrum about their rights, their realities, their challenges, but more importantly, about our education, our sensitization to bring them, to make them feel safer, to make life simpler for them at work and everywhere else. So let the dialogue start, let the discussions start, and I'm sure we're going to come to some great understanding on the topic today. With that, I've been waiting for this. Let me introduce the panelists we have here today with us. To start off, can you please spotlight Dr.Akkai for me? Is she spotlighted? Okay. Okay, is she with us? I saw her joining.
Yes, but the video is off, Aparna, so we cannot spotlight.
Sure. So let me start off with the introduction. Now, our first panelist is a transgender activist, a motivational speaker, and a singer. And for her work in activism, she has received the Rajyotsava Prashasti, the second highest civilian honor in the state of Karnataka, and an honorary doctorate from the Indian Virtual University for Peace and Education. She's an ambassador and a strong voice advocating for the acceptance and social inclusion of the LGBTQIA+ community. And in keeping with this ideology, Dr. Padmashali, or rather Dr.Akkai Padmashali, had filed a petition in the Supreme Court of India for the abolition of the now defunct Section 377, stating that this colonial law was a gross violation of our constitutional rights. She is also the founder of Ondede, which means Convergence, a human rights organization that recognizes and acknowledges the existing movements for the vulnerable sections of the society and works to link the different groups through areas of dialogues, research, and action on dignity, voice, and sexuality. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Dr. Akkai Padmashali. What an honor it is to have you with us today. Great. With that, let me introduce our next panelist. He's an equal rights activist, a diversity and equity inclusion champion, a motivational speaker, a gender and sexuality trainer for nonprofits. He's also one of the most vocal proponents of the decriminalization, I'm sorry about it, that's like a tongue twister for me, decriminalization of homosexuality in India, and even moved the Supreme Court for this. Notably, in June 2018, he filed an impleement application for the abolition of Section 377 of the Constitution. He currently works as the head of DENI, that is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, with a leading bank. He's also the co-founder of a nonprofit, an advertising and marketing professional, an author, a columnist, and a person with bylines in several national and international publications. Honestly, his introduction can go on for pages. He also featured in several primetime shows, especially one, which I'm sure you all have heard of or at least seen at some point. It was that moving episode on Satyameva Jayate, where he spoke about child abuse. And he's also featured on NDTV's popular show, We the People. Again, please, a big round of applause for Harish Iyer. Welcome to the Gabbys, Mr. Harish Iyer. So he's given me a heads up, he's on the road, he's on his way to Goa, and the internet connection is quite choppy, but he still made it. So thank you for that. Next. Thank you. Our next panelist. She's an Indian Air Force veteran. She has served as an officer for over a decade in forward fighter bases in South, North, and Northeast of India. In her second innings, she's found her calling in championing the cause of the LGBTQI+ community. And as a queer sensitization catalyst, she writes, speaks, and trains on diversity, equity, and inclusion with a special focus on the queer community. Towards this, she has earned multiple certifications from the universities of Colorado, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, and Stanford School of Medicine. She's currently working towards a diploma in counseling and simultaneously penning 2 books, not one, 2 books. One for parents titled Help, My Kid's Queer, and another one for India Incorporation titled Queer Queries. Something most people don't know about her is that she's equally passionate about animals and is a poet at heart. She's also been one of our biggest supporters from the day we decided to have this program. Thank you very much and welcome to the Gabbys Squadron Leader, Delshad Master.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Final panelist. He's not an unknown face for most of us, but here's a side we probably didn't know about him. Our final panelist, Toastmaster Sourav. Toastmaster Sourav Dutta has been a business leader with Fortune 500 companies and some of the leading brands in India and USA. In the last 2 decades, he has held senior leadership positions with companies like Hewlett-Packard, Airtel, and Pantaloons. Before starting his entrepreneurial venture, he was a director of analytics and data science with companies like Target and JCPenney. As an academician, he has been teaching MBA and MDP students in reputed institutes like MICA, Ahmedabad. Currently, he runs an edutech startup, Practive, which works with colleges and corporates to empower future leaders. Sourav is also a professional keynote speaker for the last 10 years, delivering keynote sessions in reputed conferences and summits in India, Indonesia, Singapore, Thailand, and the USA. And more importantly, he's also our president, the president of the Toastmasters, Gabbys Toastmasters Club. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for all our panelists here. Thank you very much, and we welcome you all to the Gabbys. So, without further ado, let's get started. Let's open up the channel to speak about inclusion of the LGBTQI plus community and everything that we need to know and want to know, because you know what? You're not going to get a better set of people to answer those questions. With that, I have a first question, or rather a first topic for Harish today. So Harish, let's get started with you. Our first question for you is, this is in line with setting the basis for this discussion, because most of us here aren't even aware of what LGBTQI stands for, what are the challenges and so on. So this is like a very basic question to help people understand where this discussion is coming from. So how prevalent is non-inclusion at our workplaces and at our society at large? How deep-rooted is it? Can you tell us about it?
Thank you so much for this question. I think it's incredibly important for us to understand, because I personally believe that the onus of inclusion lies on those who are included, not on those who are excluded. So with that, I think it becomes incredibly important that not just LGBT, all communities which are smaller in number, it becomes important for the ones who are larger in number to be inclusive of people who are smaller in number, not just the LGBT community. People aren't even aware of what the difference is between sex, sexuality, and gender. People think of sex in the binary. People think of gender in the binary. People use sex and gender interchangeably. People don't understand sexuality. Okay, people have various different understandings of what sexuality could mean, and they think that still, I mean, we must have won a law. We must have something that would have led to the reading down of Section 377, but that's only the beginning of the end of discrimination against LGBTQ people in India. What is needed is an open. I mean, we are a place where definitely we are having sex, because we can't really become a population of so many people without sex. But the conversation about sex, conversation about sexuality, sex and sexuality education in schools and colleges, that's yet not begun, right? All talk about sex is not pornography. All talk about sexuality is not pornography. And there is no religion. There is no religion that stands for discrimination. There is no religion that stands stands against humanity. Or the basis of religion is to stand for science, stand for humanity. So with that basis is how we won Section 377, and on the basis of our constitution. And it is very prevalent because people aren't even aware. In America, a recent study showed that there are around 16% of the population. There is no study when it comes to India, 16% of the population who's not heterosexual and not cisgendered. So there is no such study in India. But does that mean that all queers have moved to America? That's not the truth. The truth is that there are queer people in this call. There are queer people everywhere, and there are people in the queer spectrum everywhere. Just that if they have not come out, they are not speaking about it. Instead of instigating them, instead of asking them, instead of prodding them to come out, why don't we become an inclusive space that they could feel at ease to say and be who they are, to say and be who we are? Simple things like for instance, discussions that we have at the coffee table during our workspace. You'll have three people. You say we are not very discriminatory, but you'll have discussions about how my husband and I had a fight yesterday, how my in-laws and my children were speaking about it, how my wife was speaking about something. That is not inclusive. Do we use the word partner instead of wife? Are we cognizant of the fact that there are other people who might not be, we take a lot of things for granted, and we don't understand that these these general pleasantries are also not afforded to the LGBTQ community. There's a long way to go, but we are in the journey. We have begun the journey at Toastmasters, and in all places, we are breaking the prejudice. We are taking the first step. And the first step to inclusion is to speak outright and to not have not have any filters when it comes to, I know that you have I heard the announcement at the beginning that you wouldn't speak about sex, sexuality, sex, or this thing, but that's from a negative standpoint. But sex is a conversation everyone should be having about. We should be telling our children that if they look at their right at the time, I've often asked you, when does this education begin? It begins when the child grows up and points at their body parts. That's when you need to say that this is called a penis, this is called a vagina. And that's when sex education begins, right? Instead of giving it funny names. And that's not, children are unbiased. This bias exists in our minds, not in the minds of those children. The PAP exists in our minds, not in the minds of those children. So, so as long as it's propagated in a right scientific way, we should be speaking about it. And yes, we have a long way to go, but the journey has begun.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harish. The journey has begun for us as well, because we are learning with every meeting. At the Gabbys, although we say we don't, we say be sensitive when you speak about sex, religion, and politics, although it is open and it is welcoming to these conversations, and we will continue to grow in that way. Thank you very much. So my next question, that was quite an interesting information, and probably something very, very important for people who have not even been exposed to this idea of LGBTQI and inclusion. So just further prodding on that, I'd like to ask the Toastmaster Delshad our next question. So how important, what can you possibly do at your workplace? What is the issue at your workplace regarding the communication? Like he spoke about having gender neutral communication. So regarding that, in that aspect, what do you see as a problem at our workplace specifically?
So initially the problem begins because when you speak of inclusion, okay, you're doing it as a mandate. All right. Most people in HR do that because they are asked to do it. Right. The problem begins right there, because you may not feel about the cause. You're just doing it because it has been prescribed. Right. So the first step would be to sensitize everyone, including the HR. Right. It starts with HR and then goes down. At every step, whether it's your internal communication, whether it's even your job description, whether it's the mails you send out, like Harish said, every place, every time you speak, are we considerate about our language? Are we being inclusive in our language? Right? It has to begin there. Also, when the HR takes in people, you take on saying, we want diverse people. So you take people with disabilities, you take people from the LGBTQIA community, but then the mandate doesn't stop there. The onus is on HR to make them feel included and, have belongingness within them, or they will leave. So it's not about tick marking and saying, okay, we need to take on, 10% of our staff needs to be LGBTQ. There'll be a churn. There'll be an instant churn after 6 or 8 months if they do not feel included. And it's an ongoing cycle. Another place where I agree with Harish is it's for the majority to start the process of including the minority. It's not the other way around. The onus is on the majority, right? And it cannot be said, we've taken the person in, now it's up to the team and the team lead and the team manager to now make him feel included. Have you sensitized your team to accept a person from this community or from any other minority into the workplace? Now that onus lies largely with the top management, with the HR. You need to teach them what inclusive language is and show them. It's not just about teaching and forgetting. It has to come through everything, through all your communication. You have to set an example with your official communication for it to become a part of your informal communication. Like discussions at the lunch table come later. Have you as an HR first done it and shown it in your practices? What about your washrooms? Have you thought about your washrooms before taking in the queer community? Have you thought about all your internal communication? Things like these using the word spouse, thinking of maternal, paternal leave, even for adopted children, thinking of insurance in terms of, a person who has a partner who's not recognized by law, So all of these go into first setting the example. When you want people to discuss in informal terms, also be inclusive in their language, you have to set the example in your formal communication. Once you set it in your formal communication, it becomes a way of life in that company, in the corporate, and then they start noticing it, then they start being aware of it, and then they become cautious even in their informal communication. That's when true inclusion happens. But if you just keep giving them gyan, if you just keep having seminar after seminar and then not really practicing it, when the panelist has left, or when the trainer has left, if you've not actually implemented it, it does not really seep down into the psyche of the staff, and that's where the divide still exists.
Right. Wow, that's, when Harish said we have a long way to go, yes, I knew there is a long way to go, but when you speak about it from this aspect of having to drill down an idea into the psyche of every level, every layer, in every action, it does require a lot of hands on deck. And that is why these conversations are so important. So keeping that in mind, my next question for Dr. Akkai Padmashali. So Dr. Akkai, are you with us?
Yes, I'm totally here.
Oh, okay, great, wonderful. Okay, so my question for you is, now we get to a workplace only after we've grown up to a certain extent, right? We're adults by the time we get there. So as a society, as maybe even as parents, where do you see the problem lies in this issue? Like, where do you see the disconnect is happening when it comes to inclusion? Because like Harish said, as children, we are very unbiased. Where does it happen? Where does the problem start? Can you tell us about it?
I feel that the problem is across. When I say across, from your mindset to your notion of thinking, from the way you accept, and the amount of discussion that we had hardly, where you don't feel more comfortable. I endorse what Harish has mentioned. Hi, Harish. In that context of getting this through about how do you break barrier, how do you challenge the notion of gender, how do you challenge the notion of sexuality, is something that we keep discussing in our movements. And especially coming from the working class, the non-English speaking, the poorest of the poor, I think we focus to that section of society, which include me being part of that. I know that being a transgender, a lesbian, a gay man, or Jogappa, Koti, Marnadi, Shivshakti, Jogta, Akwa, Nirvan, Pantisatla, Satla, I think these are all the local traditional cultural identities, more accepted towards your cultural thing. But when it comes to social status, you are being excluded. And why is a dual stand? I think keeping that to the center and aspect, you also want to speak about the dignity aspect of it, the constitutional rights aspect of it. I know many of us, including the entire transgender, gender non-conforming, the sexual minority community, most of us we face is something called the less or the low self-esteem, or the self-respect or acceptance is always very far from the truth. I think keeping that in mind, I think all these 3 decades of fight, agitation, movement building has happened for people to accept the way we are today. I think in that process, many people's life has been assassinated. People are being killed. People are being brutally beaten up. People were brutally, sexually assaulted. I think many things has happened. I think for each and every section, when we come on the streets to condemn such attitude, was very clear and very straight, saying that we are human beings first and everything next. I think we did not make these gender stereotype boxes. We did not make the sex stereotype boxes. We did not make the sexuality stereotype boxes. But We were there and we were and we are here today to ensure that human beings are just common in its nature and we are part of nature. I remember, I think the whole journey of activism, how as a community, we were still struggling to be part of our family institutions, accepting the way you are, and be it your education institution, be it employment opportunities, be it the social dignity, social inclusivity. I should thank the Supreme Court for delivering two huge verdicts in favor of the community. And the judgment did not come so, like so easily. I think there's a whole struggle of the working class, non-English speaking sexual minorities. People were made to bring this agenda before the Constitution bench, before the Supreme Court utmost benches, to hear our voices. We are the most oppressed, we are the most vulnerable. And for what? Because of our sexuality and because of our gender identity. Today, those two judgments are the backbone of the entire movement. I think somewhere the legislative processes, the right-wing thinking processes has really diluted the entire notion of community and understanding what exactly the community wants. Still, there are so much of loopholes in the Transgender Act, which was passed in 2019, 2020. I think as a community, we are still in the process of fighting with across sections for a just and non-discriminatory world. Yeah. I'm done.
Wow. Wow, that's a lot of food for thought hearing the three of you speak. That's so much to wrap our heads around, so much work to be done, so much we have to do. Honestly, to think that these are two different worlds. We exist as if these are two different worlds, but we don't realize that this is not another community. It is our brother, our sister, our sons, our parents, our friends. It's just us. And for all you know, it could be us living in a shell, not knowing how to feel, what to feel. Wow. Thank you so much for enlightening us. Thank you. So coming back to the professional world, I have a question for our fourth panelist. So, Sourav, what is happening on the corporate front in organizations regarding inclusion and diversity? What is happening so far? Can you tell us?
So see, the corporate world is not outside the world that we live in, right? So whatever problems that you are seeing outside of the corporate world, or in the day-to-day life that Dr. Akkai talked about, that Harish talked about, I think those problems are pretty much there in the corporate world also. So this has been my realization over the years, that this problem has got three stages or three levels. And this is not any study or anything. This is more of my observation, having worked with people of various diverse backgrounds. So first is, I think there's a problem with conditioning. The way we are raised, right? We are told that gender is in binary and there is a man and there is a woman and this is how it should be and this is how it's supposed to be. Part of that comes from the conditioning, not whole of it, because let's accept that in the Indian society, we are in such a strong denial mode that every mom believes that, lesbians and gays exist, but definitely not in my family, not in the circle that I know, not in my relatives. I mean, we are too cultured, we are too traditional. I mean, this is unthinkable. Come on, man. Those things happen somewhere. I've heard about it. That's the conditioning. So conditioning entirely cannot be responsible for our intolerance towards homosexuality, for instance. So part of that comes from my understanding is a cognitive bias, which is more around conformity bias, around affinity bias. So we feel more comfortable around people who are like us. So if I like a woman as my partner, I would feel more comfortable hanging around with people who also like women as their partner. Not so comfortable hanging around with men who find men as more attractive as their partner, or maybe both men and women. So that affinity bias is what impacts us. And then the third thing, which is even more dangerous, is insensitivity, where we don't even realize that what we are saying or doing, we are educated, I think, and this problem, I may be, being very curt and direct here, but maybe 60, 70, 80, or even 90, 95% of the people on this call would probably be facing this issue, that we don't realize that we are being insensitive because we are educated, right? When we connect with the cause, we are here on this call because we understand this is important. But trust me, when we go out, it is our insensitivity towards whatever we are doing, because we really don't feel the way the other person is feeling, because we are not going through what he or she is going. right? So I think that's where Harish talked about that. We are talking about wives and husbands, but that perspective will not there be with me, and that's something that's, I think that's a big education that all of us got today, right? That sensitivity is what we need to bring. I think these are the three things that's lacking in the corporate as well. And let me now make a very honest confession. I was an acute homophobic. Homophobic in the sense, there has been cases where I have got down from the auto rickshaw because the person next to me seemed like a gay. I felt so threatened that something would happen to me in the auto rickshaw, and by the time I get down, I felt so unsafe and so insecure. So this was me several years back. And today, I think I'm in a position where this change that I see in myself is to a large extent is because of these conversations that I'm a part of, or the people that I've interacted with. And all this happened because of various changes. But I'll tell you one big factor which came in educating me about this. And I'm wearing this Target T-shirt. It's not an accident. It's for a reason. So in 2016, Target made a change in their bathroom and fitting room policy. I don't know how many people here are aware of this. So what they decided is that we will let transgenders and people of the LGBTQI community to use the bathroom and the fitting room of their choice, right? So you may have a male bathroom, but I decide, because I identify myself as a woman, my sexuality is different, my sexual identity is different than what my born identity is. So hence I decide to use a female bathroom, and that right Target gave to all the customers and the employees. Seems like a very logical, sensitive move, right? You will all be able to connect with it. So this is what happened with Target. Across the United States, several states boycotted Target. And I mean, people in the states, not the states. I mean, there were several consumers in those states, they boycotted us. Our sales dropped by 7%, 7% on a year-on-year basis, just for one change in the bathroom policy and becoming progressive. You know what Target did? Target said, it's okay. We will take a hit in sales. We will take a hit in sales where we will not change our position on this. People went a step forward and they started making fake videos. So there was one particular video which created a lot of controversy. And nothing that I'm telling you is proprietary information. All this is out in the web. You can research this and find this out. There was an incident where someone sent their daughter in the female bathroom and then sent a man, and that man apparently tried to molest that woman, and then he put a video saying that, see how Target is making the world unsafe for us. To counter that, Target spent $20 million for having single-use bathrooms, not the ones which have got multiple cubicles, but single-use bathrooms in more than 1,500 stores. So this is the kind of conviction and measures that we need to take, not just lip service. As squadron leader Delshad Master mentioned, you give HR a mandate, you have got a 5% diversity target, you have got a 10% diversity target, and then you keep on putting in your annual returns that, X percentage of my C-suite is women, Y percentage is from the LGBTQI community. It achieves nothing. It is just all a hogwash. What is important is measures like this. When you are paying through your pocket, when it's making a hole in your pocket, when it's denting your sales, and yet you decide, I will not budge, I will stand with it. Did Target lose in the long run? The results for you to see. Target is today the most successful retail company in the world, hitting Amazon right in their teeth. So it is a wrong notion that if you stand with the right people, with the right cause, that you will not get the right results. In the short run, you will be hurt. Change is always painful. So this working with Target was a big realization. And I started working with people more closely who were who were gay couples, and they and it was a new realization for me altogether. By that time, I think in US they had allowed gay marriages. So I had a lot of partners who were gay couples, and I said I was a homophobic, right? And from there I came to a stage, and this is where I consider myself as a spiritual victory of myself, where I had one of my friends and a partner. He was a co-director in Target. He reached out to me. So incidentally, one aspect of my life is also that in the year 2015, I was adopted by my daughter, a 6-month-old daughter, as her parents. And when I shared that experience with him, he actually once he wrote me an email saying that sort of, can me and my partner adopt a child from India? And I tried to help him out. Unfortunately, in India, the laws around adoption are pretty, again, those are also very gender skewed and very binary. So it did not happen because of various legal tangles. But then I salute myself that I could beat all the conditioning, the biases, and the sensitivity, shifted myself from a homophobic person to a person who, someone can reach out to and say, I want to walk your path. I want your help in adopting a child. So that's my learning from the professional space.
Wow. So for all those fence sitters out there who think we can live in a world where it is neutral, where you can shut your eyes and just go on with your lives as if it doesn't matter to you, I think that's a story you have to hear. And those were opinions which should help you decide that inclusion is the only way. It means more success. It means better living for everyone around us. Those are fantastic takes. And you know what? All the while you're always speaking, my personal chat has been buzzing with questions. So we'd like to take one question from an audience. So Reena had a fantastic question. I think, Harish, this was directed at you. So Lakshmi, if you could unmute Reena, please.
Hi, very good morning, Mr. Harish. I had a question. My child was just here when I was doing the Zoom meeting, and it was on a speaker, and I told him, why don't you listen to all this? It is so important, because he's a 14-year-old. I said, you should know what, if ever you come across this thing. And he was like, well, I know all about it. I'm like, what? He's like, yes, some of my friends are already, I know that they're bi. I was like shocked. And I was like, do you even know what is bi? He said, of course I know. And then he named a few friends, and that is of course confidential. But I was just thinking, are 14-year-olds and 16-year-olds already so aware, or is it just the media and the Instagram posts that they see? Because I know that a few of their friends, his friends, dress differently to stand out, or is this an attention-seeking gimmick? Or can they really know at such an early age what are their sexual preferences? Or is it just to get attention from their parents and from the society? Thank you.
Well, children, sexuality is a spectrum. Gender is also a spectrum. So, and you can discover your gender or your sexuality at any stage of your life. Okay, I'm not a Republican, but if you look at many people, Caitlyn Jenner, for that matter. Caitlyn Jenner was a football player, and she was she had parented 2 children when she was when she was in a male body. She had parented 2 children, and after that she transitioned as Caitlyn Jenner. So this can happen at any stage of your life. And children these days are more intuitive, and sometimes we should be willing to sit down with our children and learn from our children. It's not always a teach down, but learn from them also is something that we need to do. As I said, the best knowledge that could be given to children would be from parents. Okay, right from the time that the child is born, the girl child is put in at the hospital itself. The girl child is put in a pink basket. The male child is put in a blue basket, right? And then the child is told that you are actually a boy and you're supposed to dress like this. Who are you to decide? How do you know that your child's gender is what? You know what your child's sex is because you see the child has got a penis or a vagina, right? but who are even parents to decide what their child's gender is, right? Who are you now? Now you spoke about your child's friend being. Would we be open if our own children come out? If our own children come out and say that they happen to be from the LGBTQ community, so that's something be open about. And yes, sometimes we need to learn from our children, right? And it could be anyone can discover their sexual. Forget the children. You can discover your sexuality at some point. You might be 55 and you might discover that I'm lesbian or I am transgender. It can happen at any stage of your life. It could be latent and you might realize it later. So are we open? And also it's important to understand what LGBTQ children are subjected to. They're subjected to a heterosexual lifestyle all their life, right? Just to add to Saurav, how he became accepting of LGBTQ people, do we also realize that LGBTQ people are always respecting of heterosexual people? Like I've lived in a heterosexual world all my life. So you're not doing them a favor, you're returning the favor because they have been accepting of us, right? They in the sense I include myself in they, right? I accepted my parents' heterosexual marriage right from the time I'm born. So my parent accepts me. She's not doing me a favor. They are returning the favor because I also accepted them.
Well, that is a very different take, right? It's mutual. We always think, oh, we have to accept. Honestly, they don't need accepting. They're not broken. They're not secondhand things that are handed down. No, it is education and sensitization and respect that we need to bring into the picture. Wow, fantastic. And kids, wow, I'm glad your kid asked that question and knew that, Reena. It gives a lot of hope. So with that in mind, there's another question that we had. We've actually got quite a lot of questions. And before we move on to the next round of topics to discuss, one more question, and this is for Dr. Akkai. So the question that we got is, should we have awareness sessions in schools so there's more acceptance of this community? And if yes, is there a law existing which allows this curriculum? And if not, any steps taken to guide the younger generation do we have? Because we're talking about children, I thought I'd bring up this question. Dr. Akkai, would you be able to throw some light on this, please?
Definitely.
Thank you.
Definitely, yes. I think any such thing of discussing about the issues of sex, gender, sexuality concern, keeping that in mind, I remember the 2004 when the UPA government was ruling the country, where the government intention was to bring sex education to the nation. I think the most force was opposing the sex education from the family institutions, the family networks. They said no to sex education, and the government response was why? And the response from the parents was very clear. No, this is a very cultured, traditional country. We cannot hear sex for our children. And as I think what Mr. Harish was mentioning, Mr. and Mrs. Harish was mentioning, I think I remember that the sex education is not about intercourse we're teaching our children. It has a certain amount of age. There is a brain maturity. There is an atmosphere that needs to be, our child should be brought up in certain way, and I endorse, yes, the sex education, the gender education, the orientation, the preferences, the attraction, the choices. If we are not going to make it in 21st century, I think it will not take for the next 10 centuries to happen this. I think we are talking about a world which needs to be open to accept the way it is now today. The second point of view, yes, I think the Karnataka state is quite putting its efforts, working with the liberalists, with feminists who are part of the education institution, from your primary education to the higher education, to the colleges, to degree, colleges, to universities, to other many education institutions are concerned. I think I'm so happy that many institutions have come forward, and we are in the process of having the module / curriculum to teach to like the youngsters like of this decade or century. The other thing, the teachers who took backstep, we do not want to teach the issues of sexuality and gender. I think that's a big question we are dealing now. And we also give that space and ensuring them the sexual minority community shall take the responsibility to educate and talk about sex, gender, sexuality, and human rights that are being occurred around the politics of sexuality and gender. I think there is an amount of activism happening in the context of education, but I'm so disappointed with the national education policy. The national education policy which the government recently introduced has nothing in favor of whatever sector you can speak about. But very unfortunately, that the national education policy is just a sort of hopes, but not in practice. I think we look forward for that to take up in different platforms. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So just a follow-up question to that, Dr. Akkai. Is there any forum or any website where we can actually take our children to guide them? Because I don't think as parents we are fully ready to, or rather knowledgeable to educate them. So is there any place, is there a website? Could you share?
I don't think there is a website.
Okay.
But there are people who are speaking about this, and we also have this group called Study Circle Group. The Study Circle Group is basically brings up an issue of homosexuality, or talk about the history of sexuality and history of sexuality. And we refer history was before 2009.
Okay.
His means a man context. Her history is post 2009 context. So we want to bring that context to this educational institution perspective, because our struggle was from a very feminist perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So study circle does exist for it. Okay. Great. So I think Harish has reached Goa, and boy, I envy him. Finally there. So great. Let's get on with the next round. So the first round we had structured in such a way that we wanted to bring out the problems in whatever best in possible way that we could, the basic issues. Now we want to talk more about how what can we, everyone in the society, do and be in order to improve the situation. So around the solutioning and around the thought that we can implant in people's head, that is what the next set of topics are going to be. So let me start off with that. So actually the question was for Akkai, but I think she's attending to a child there. So let me quickly ask this question to maybe Delshad. So yeah, so Delshad, would you like to take this question, or rather this topic?
Okay,
So,
is back in case.
Okay. Oh, she's back.
Okay.
No, but I think we could just go with you and then.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we are speaking about workplace and organizations, but if you think about it, as Akkai rightly pointed out, this segment struggles even to get basic education. So those very few who are able to get educated and then move into an organization are sparse and far in between. The majority of them still tend to live in the lower strata.
Yes.
And very rarely seep into any other area of work and things like that. So in that perspective, and since you also come from a defense background, we would like to know, in the other segments of the society, it could be defense, or it could be probably menial jobs, or anywhere, what is this situation and what can any one of us do about it?
Right. So firstly, Aparna, I'll answer this in phases.
Yes, please.
Firstly, we tend to think of transgenders only as belonging to the lower strata, just like you mentioned, because our exposure to most transgenders is either that of people doing sex work or people begging out on the streets. What we forget is, just like Harish mentioned, this transition can happen anytime at any age or stage in life. Right. So it is our mistake, even in the corporates, when we think of, including transgenders in the workplace, we only think of, menial jobs, we can have them in housekeeping, we can have them in the lower cadre of, the workplace. But that's not true. A transgender could be an engineer, teacher, scientist, any brilliant person, hold a doctorate. The person could be a dentist. You have Dr. Haldar, who's a transgender dentist. So the fact that we think of transgenders as someone who can only be skilled and given a menial job because they haven't been privy to education, that itself is incorrect, right? So first we need to remove that from our head, that we can only skill them and then give them vocational training and then give them jobs. It doesn't happen that way. It's not necessarily so. gendered person is any person who wishes or who is not in conformity with the sex assigned at birth. That is all it is, right? So if he or she chooses to identify as a trans man or a trans woman, that is just one little part of who they are. The education they've got, the degree they've got determines who, what their profession should be. It is not, their gender identity cannot be the standpoint of what their profession should be. That's just a very, very tiny part of who they are. Right, so we should never forget that. Just because we have a transgender principal as well now, a trans woman principal, she's the principal of a women's college, Dr. Bandyopadhyay. So, all in all, education is separate. That cannot be confused with gender identity, right? But having said that, I also agree that most trans persons are not privy to education system, especially if their parents have kicked them out of the house, or if they've grown up in small villages, if they've grown up in small towns where gender identity itself is an issue. And right from your home, your principal, your teachers, none of them understand. In fact, when you go and complain to them, they point fingers at you and say, you are the one who's, not conforming to your gender. So yes, I mean, of course, people will harass you and people will say things about you, right? So in those cases, yes, unfortunately, they don't, they're not privy to education the way the rest of us are. And therefore, efforts have to be made at educating the educators itself. The education has to begin at the family level, if not the parents. And the next circle of trust for the child is when the child goes to school. So if the teacher doesn't know what he or she is dealing with, if the principal does not acknowledge what he or she is dealing with, and in fact, segregates the child or insults the child, or also is, hands in glove at actually harassing the child, then obviously the child is never going to be interested in education. Even if, again, on paper, the policy says that you're supposed to admit all children. So you may not throw out the child, and the parents may also forcibly make the child attend. But do you think such a child would be good at studies? Do you think such a child would grow up with self-confidence and self-worth? He or she would end up failing in all their subjects. They would not be interested in studies. So it's not about what we put on paper and say, education for all. Okay, or what we put in a policy is the means to the end. So it's just a foot in the door. The ultimate, test of the pudding would lie in the people who have to implement the policy being sensitized to it, and they being inclusive. If the teachers are not trained, if the principal, if parents would come in much later, because to train every parent is very difficult, but at least the next point of contact, the next point of adult contact for a child, if he or she finds connection with the teacher, with the principal, they grow up to have a lot of self-confidence. If the teacher puts a stop at, nobody's going to harass this child in school. Harish, you want to say something? Sorry.
No, I was just wanting to add to what you were saying. I was just saying that, yeah, you're saying the right thing.
Yeah. So the next point of contact has to be sensitized, and that is in the government's hand. The government really cannot sit and dictate that all parents come for a coaching course, or there is no course on parenting per se. But what the government can control is putting the teachers through a course, putting the principals, the heads of educational institutions through a course. There are medical institutions where we churn out nurses and doctors, and even they do not know how to deal with transgender persons. They do not know that. They do not know, how to treat a person from the LGBTQ spectrum at all. They are at a loss. They end up insulting the person. They do not know which toilet to send the person to. None of that. And they themselves end up discriminating against the patient, which is why most trans persons don't even have access to medical care, or choose not to opt for medical care. Because forget your illness. You go there and you're made to feel like a victim of mental illness because of who you are. So your actual illness at hand is not even spoken about or considered or taken care of. Forget about the actual illness. They start dealing with your gender identity as an illness and start counseling as to क्यों कर रहे हो ऐसा, मतलब अच्छा खासे माँ बाप हैं, वो तुम्हारी शादी कर देंगे, why you here, why you not listening to them, all of that. So a lot of our educational institutes first require train the trainer sensitization. The people who are teaching us, the people who are training us, the people who are dealing with our children are not sensitized enough to deal with those children. Just doing a B.Ed is not enough. B.Ed should probably have this also. You know, just like Akkai mentioned, it's not just the policy that you have for the kids, the national education policy for the kids, which should have sex education. The person who's teaching that policy, he or she is again from the society, right? Sourav said, whether it's a corporate or whether it's a school, or we all come from the same society. So it doesn't really matter unless the people who are imparting the education themselves feel for the cause. They're not doing it because textbook mein hai isliye padha diya. Are they genuinely equipped to teach it? Do they genuinely feel aligned with the cause? Only then will they teach it with equal passion. Otherwise, it'll just be a tick mark subject. It'll just be another thing that, theek hai, government ne dal diya, you know, everybody's happy for the time being that, oh, we're being inclusive and all that, but the child doesn't really get to learn. So, yeah. Wow. It's the second point of contact of adults, which I think the government can control and the government should have a say in it.
So I from what you're saying, I feel, or rather, I know for sure that representation is paramount here. Representation of the community at every level becomes important, because how will I understand your problem if I haven't been through it to a lot of, you know? So if you're saying an HR has to address a problem in a company, the HR community should have people from the LGBTQI community. If you don't have it, how will I know that, yes, you need a gender neutral restroom, you need, you know, you're going through so and so at work? How will I even align with it? How will I even know what is going on, right? So I think representation at every level, at every decision-making level, the teachers, the HR community, and much more, the recruitment places, everywhere, we need representation, and or maybe even allies. So yeah, that's the kind of. Sure.
So Aparna, I would just like to add that never have it for having it. So, you know, by saying that we should have those people in HR, again, let's not make it like a tick mark representation. Okay. If you have that person, then you have to give him the space and the space and hear his voice out or hear her voice out, right? Just tick marking that, oh, within our HR also we have a person from the community is not enough. And at the same time, having a person also need not be necessary as long as you have an open mind and you are willing to listen and understand what their pain points are. For example, I am an ally, I don't belong to the community, but that does not stop me from speaking to a person from the community and understanding their pain points. So if I'm the HR of a company, I don't have to belong to the community, or I don't have to first recruit someone in HR who belongs to the community and then sit him down or sit her down and say, okay, now tell me what are your problems. That you could do any which ways. All it requires is an open mind. It doesn't require the person person from the community. It doesn't require you to just take mark that, oh, we have representation from the LGBTQ community even in our HR, right? It requires you to basically have an open mind, have employee resource groups where allies and people from the community come together. They share pain points, they share the problems. If the person from the community does not want to represent the problem to HR, an ally could go ahead and represent the problem. So it's not necessary to have representation from the community in HR to be open and to be an inclusive company. Okay. As long as the mindset is open, because like what Sourav said, Target opened its toilets even to customers. So customers, you can't say that, okay, customers come and declare who's LGBT, who's not. The policy is the top management decides, okay, we are going to be inclusive. Right? Doesn't happen that, okay, top management says now let's have a person from the LGBTQ community in top management. Yeah. You have to decide the intention should be there. And if the intention is there, the methods will follow. The will has to be there. Everything else is secondary. So, yeah.
So, yeah, Harish, you want to say something?
I wanted to share a very interesting anecdote.
I was going to ask you that. I read about it.
So when I work with Axis Bank, so I'm now comfortable to share that as well. So I had joined. This was my first corporate stint, and I had joined the organization, and I had spent around a week's time in the organization, and the head of HR called me to the room. I went all suited, booted, dressed. in a 3 blazer suit. I picked out the most sexiest suit in pink color. So as stereotypes go, I wanted to be every stereotype and more. And I went to the office and she called me to the room and she started shouting. She started looking at me. Her name is Rajkamal. She looked at me and she started saying, "What is this? Why are you dressed like this?" So I was like, I, I thought that I'm dressed like everyone else. Or is she offended by the pink color? And I had all these questions in my head. And she looked back and she said, "Harish, why are you trying so hard to be like us? Don't be like us. You are you and you have been hired for who you are. Dress the way you are. Don't try to fit in, stand out. That's what you are. You don't have to try and fit in to the bank or anything. I just called you over here because I was furious when I saw that you're trying to fit in. You're here because you're different. Just be who you are. If this gives you comfort, be this. But don't try to be this just because we all are like this. Right? Don't be boring like us. Come dressed in the way that you want to. We have some formal rules. If you adhere to that, you come dressed in those. Okay, obviously I can't go in a micro mini skirt to office, right? So apart from that, if you adhere to some of those rules, then you can fit into the whole thing. So after that, I still went wearing a suit 3 or 4 times till we finally changed. I'm the head of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Till I finally changed the dress code policy and made it equal for all. And then I went dressed the way I want to be dressed, because it's unfair if I go dressed that way, but someone else, another colleague, because of my proximity with the head HR, but another colleague is not allowed the same. So I think the same thing. There was another anecdote that I want to share when it comes to schools, picking up from what Delshad was speaking. Um, I remember I went and gave this huge lecture in a school and to students, and they all were very receptive, very understanding, in and suddenly after the lecture, 2 days after the lecture, I got a call from the principal saying that there is a parent who is incredibly upset about the fact that I've spoken about sex, sexuality, and gender. I spoke no pornographic stuff. I mean, I just spoke to 8th and 9th standard students, and I told them that you can love anybody you want, you can be whoever you are, and you need to be confident. You need to accept people who are different. I explained the difference about sex assigned at birth, what is gender. I explained all those things. Nothing pornographic, nothing controversial. I didn't even speak about sexual intercourse or anything of that kind. So I was called to this thing. So it seems the child was beaten up by the parent, and saying ki because the child actually asked, the mother said ki tum jao, you went to the loo, so did you clean your chichi? And the child told the mother, it's not called chichi, it's called vagina. Okay. And the mother got really upset and she slapped the child. So then I went and of course, there was a huge ruckus. I went and explained to the child, explained to the parent what exactly I spoke about. I explained I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse. So I explained that, this is what can happen. Most of the children who happen to be queer are also survivors of child sexual abuse. Because when you have something to hide, you have someone to exploit as well, right? You become more vulnerable. So I explained all those things. It took me some time. And then I started training all the teachers in that school. So since the past 15 years or so, I must have spoken at around 200, 300 schools and colleges across the length and breadth of the country, right? And mostly I speak to teachers because it's so important to open their minds. Because I will come, I'll give a lecture and I'll go away. Where will the students go after that? Right? So I go to PTA associations, I go to teachers. In fact, if you just Twitter my name, you will see a lot of right-wing hate against me, thinking that I go and teach pornography to young children and I corrupt their minds. You will have opposition because for everything that you stand up for, there are going to be people who will stand against you. But as long as you are right in your gut and in your guts and your gumption and you right deep within in your gut, and you're doing the right thing for the betterment of the world, uh, many trans people, take their lives. It's not even documented, right? I remember a child who took their life after the 10th standard examination, and the child actually failed in the 10th standard examination, so that after the child's death, the child doesn't have to, the parents don't think that the child has died because the child happens to be transgender. So the child failed in the 10th examination and then tried taking their life, right? And the only person the child had confessed to was me. So this is the level of things could lead to. Save children's lives, educate yourself. Don't educate children, educate yourself and understand. I would like to tell everyone over here that not your neighbor, an LGBT person could be your child. Could be your child. If your child comes out to you tomorrow and tells you, will you be willing to accept your child the way your child is? Or are you going to thrust your idea of gender, your idea of sexuality, your idea of sex on that child? Right? Your child never objected to you being heterosexual. Why are you objecting to your child being who your child is? Right? So I think it's important for us. It's not about education alone. It is about saving lives. There are many children who have mental health challenges because their parents are not accepting, because their teachers, educational institutes are not accepting. There's a friend of mine, I can actually name the friend. His name is Shubham. He's now doing crowdsourcing for funds, because no bank would give him a loan for educational loan. Why? Because his 10th and 12th standard marks are not good. Do you know that I might be heading diversity, equity and inclusion. I'm a 12th fail. I'm a BSc first year fail. I'm a MSc fail, because we go through that amount of stress many a times. I'm not ashamed to say so. And LGBT children go through brilliance because they try to overcompensate, or they go through a lot of stress and they just think. Now Shubham is struggling because no bank would give him loans, and he's doing a crowdsourcing event. It reaches a plateau after a while. You'll say, why हट्टा कट्टा है, अच्छा family से belong करता है, इसको crowdsource करने की क्या जरूरत है? But the truth is that he needs to crowdsource. Why? Because we live in a bigoted world. Because that child, when he was a child, he faced cruelty in his school and college, and he wasn't allowed, and he didn't get the marks that he was required to have. He required to get as somebody else. So we take a lot of things for granted, and it's important. Shubham's fundraiser is there. Anyone wants to go Google and support him and other people who are looking out for help.
Thank you for sharing that. Those are thoughts a mind probably wouldn't even go to if someone didn't come and talk about it. I'm actually honestly overwhelmed by hearing all of that, especially the struggle people have to go through. As a mother of two very young children, I really feel very unequipped to handle them and to talk about these matters. In fact, I had a conversation for over about 2 hours a couple of days ago with Delshad, and we were talking about this. We are extremely illiterate when it comes to these matters. Most of us so-called normal people, and that is extremely unfair. Yes, Harish. Yes.
Again, when it comes to speaking to children, I was dating somebody, and so I have a niece who's 8 years of age, and I was so she looked at me, and I introduced that this is Yash, and Laksha, Polami, this is Yash. My niece's name is Polami, and my partner's name, who was my partner, his name was Yash. So I just introduced Polami to Yash, and I said, Polami, this is Yash. So she just looked at me and she said, hello, Yash, Mami. Because she understood the heterosexual context. Mama ke saath jo aayega wo mami, right? But it didn't bother her. She didn't know that, okay, Mama ke saath Mama bhi aa sakta hai. But the fact that she attended, I mean, her acceptance was that easy. She knew that.
Yeah.
She accepted the fact that he was my life partner.
That's fantastic how accepting they are, and maybe somewhere we pollute them, we corrupt them, and that should stop. Great. We, on that question, because we're talking about children, we actually had a question from one of our members. Toastmaster Kamini had a question specifically for you, Harish. Would you want to take that with her? Kamini, Lakshmi, if you can unmute Kamini. Thank you. Oh, by the way, Dr. Akkai had an emergency. She had to attend to her child, so she had to get off the call. So yeah, she just messaged us. So Kamini, shoot your question.
Thank you, Aparna. Good morning, Harish. I'm not going to call you Mr. I'll call you Harish. That sounds, pretty informal. So do you remember this? Hawa Hawaii and Main Tera Dushman all in front of me. I remember that takeaway from your episode of Satyamev Jayate with Amir Khan. And when I watched you there, what I could understand from your body language is that we often say a side has two coins. And this is so true. There is a part of you that has gone through certain thing, but there was that another side of you which just lit up when you saw your, your fantasy lady in front of you. So I would like to ask you here, which was lovely, by the way, so much of life inside you, and you're doing great work that you're doing. So I wanted to mention this in particular. Coming on to the question, I want to know from you, will talking about sexual abuse with the survivors after it has happened make it worse for them emotionally, or should we encourage them to, just come out with it so that they feel light inside?
Thank you so much. And mostly, I mean, it's also related to the queer cause, because LGBTQ people are people who face a lot of sexual abuse in their childhood as well. I think to address an issue, Kamini, you need to undress the issue. If you bottle anything inside you, it is going to end up in a volcano. People should be encouraged to speak about it openly. It's a part of you. It doesn't define, it might be a defining moment in my life, but it doesn't define me as a whole, right? And all these experiences, in America, there is, in India also, in Bangalore, there is something called the theater of the oppressed, right? So when you're pushed to this thing, you emit energy. I'm not saying that everyone needs to be pushed, everyone needs to go through some kind of trauma like I went through, but you emit some energy. And if you're able to channelize that energy in a positive way, you could become an activist, you could become an entrepreneur, you could become a dancer, you could come up in creative ways. And I think it's important to speak. And yes, it's not easy. I think the whole family needs to go through counseling many a times, not just the child who has gone through child sexual abuse. But it's important. Yeah, come on. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Harish. That does clarify a lot for us. So we are opening up for questions. If anyone has questions, I suggest you all raise your hands and we can go ahead.
So Aparna, I wanted to add something.
Yes, please.
Before we go into the questions. So there are quite a few times that we referred in our discussion today. I think Delshad mentioned about it, and then Harish talked about how supportive we can get and those kind of things. So I wanted to make two key points here. So the first thing, I don't know how many of you know, there was a serial which used to come, one of the soap operas, the Hindi soap operas, the Saas Bahu serials that we have, right? And this one was special because the Bahu in question was a transgender who got married. And my mom was a very regular, she was very regular with that particular serial, and she would watch it all the time. And she was like, she felt so sad and so bad for that, for her. And then I asked her one day when she was so attached to it, I said that interestingly, and she also wanted to open a, what do you call that, a tailoring school for transgenders. She was so charged up and so motivated. So I asked her, why tailoring school? I mean, they said that because they're not educated, so they can't do much, right? So I will open a tailoring school so that, I mean, see, at one level, I really appreciate her connecting with the pain that they go through. At the other level, let us appreciate that she also feels that, they are not educated enough, so all they can do is, stitching buttons to the shirts. So that is one big problem. And then I asked her, I kind of, provoked her and asked her, what if you found that my kid is a transgender, my son or my daughter, he's a transgender, He was like, that is impossible. That can never happen. मैं हमेशा भगवान के पास जाता हूँ, right? मैं इतना दिन से पूजा कर रही हूँ. So see, there is a degree of innocence, but this innocence is very dangerous because this innocence is what is leading to the conditioning. And even if we look here, and I'm sorry if I'm being, again, very direct. I think today is a day where we're being very direct and holding the bull by the horns. So let me continue to do that. So when Harish mentioned that at the age of 55, you could realize that you are a lesbian, I saw a hint of smile on a lot of faces on the camera. Why? It's a fact. What he is stating, it's not a joke. It's a fact. At the age of 55, you can realize that you are a lesbian or you're a bisexual, and that's totally okay. No one is telling you to go out in the open and tell everyone that I am a lesbian and start dating every other woman that you're going to find. That's not the ask here. The ask here is for you to accept that this is a possibility. How many of us here will be okay if we realize tomorrow that our children, not someone else's children, coming on this panel discussion and sharing great thoughts about homosexuality and LGBTQI, that's great. But what if it comes inside your own house? What if it is about your daughter, your son coming and saying, I'm homosexual?
Absolutely.
I would request all of us here, if there's one thing that you want to walk out of with this, from this panel discussion, is with this acceptance. Awareness we already have. We know what is LGBTQI all about. I think the acceptance that tomorrow my daughter could be a lesbian, my son could be a bisexual, and I would be okay with that. Otherwise, all that we are doing here is again going to be that tick mark. We declared ourselves as an LGBTQI friendly club, and we got a lot of brownie points for that. There are 50 people who attended our panel discussion. We are a rocking club. All that is done. That will not change a dime. That's one thing. The other thing, what happens when the society opens up? So when Scotland leader Delshad Master talked about transgender achievers, I did a quick Google search, and here is a list of achievers that I want to mention. Satyashri Sharmila. She's India's first transgender lawyer. Okay. Next one, Joyita Mondal. She is India's first transgender judge.
Wow.
Prithika Yashri. She is India's first transgender police officer. Manavi Bandyopadhyay, India's first transgender college principal. Shabnam Mossi, India's first transgender MLA. Shabi, India's first transgender soldier. Jia Das, India's first transgender medical practitioner. So if you and I decide that we will not play God, then I think we don't need to really open up tailoring schools for them. We can just give them an opportunity, because who you want to have a sexual relationship with and how should not define your ability to excel at the workplace. And if we cannot do that today, we cannot walk out with this acceptance, then I'm sorry, this entire panel discussion would be again another trickle in that drain of so-called awareness.
Yes. Thank you very much, Toastmaster Sourav, such profound words. My biggest takeaway here, or rather thought here, is sexuality is about what you feel towards others, and gender is what you feel about yourself, right? And thinking it's one other the same and it has to be a certain way is probably the biggest mistake we all do. And that is where the problem starts. Just accepting that these are two different things, and there can be a lot of permutation combinations of it, and it is none of our business. The only thing we can do is accept it. You have no choice there, and acting like we have a choice is our biggest mistake. We make life difficult for ourselves and everyone around us. So with that understanding and that acceptance of thought, let's head on to our question and answers. We have a Toastmaster Vikram who has a question for you. So Toastmaster Vikram, who's the question for? And may I know the question, please?
Sure. So first of all, great conversation, loving every bit of it. This is from experience. So I've been called funny names because I wear pink, I wear flowery clothes like the one I'm wearing today. And there have been so many times I've been in judgment of myself and so caught up in the judgment of others that sometimes my world would swirl around me and I wouldn't want pink. But then through the experiences I had, I realized that pink was very close to my heart for many reasons. So I wanted to ask Harish and Delshad, what's your advice to get out of these judgments? Because sometimes they can really pull you down.
Again, wonderful question. We are judgmental about everything, right? And that's the general way that we are. It's not true to sexuality alone or gender alone. I mean, we live in a world which is, we have the Pados ka Pintu syndrome, right? From the childhood, we are told कि देखो पड़ोस का पिंटू ने कितने अच्छे marks लिए हैं, आपको भी उतना लेना है. So we slowly and steadily need to build a world. Okay, there's no easy answers, and there's no eradication of this either. I mean, it'll never go away. We will always judge it. Do you think LGBT people are sitting in this panel, so we are not judgmental? I'm also judgmental sometimes, and I also learn sometimes. You yourself would be judgmental about some other issue, right? We all are there. Can we restrict judgment and not take judgments to the point of discrimination? That's one thing that we need to do. We all have opinions, right? We watch a movie and we say that the actor was good, actor is bad. We have political opinions. So we have opinions about Rakhi Sawant, Kangana Ranaut, everybody. So we usually have opinions about everything. Can opinions and judgments not take to the point of discrimination? That is what education needs to do. But sadly, many a times what happens is education also informs us the way to think, and we think in straight-jacketed ways, right? So the most discrimination that I have found is from educated circles, not from circles which are not educated. I don't have a straight answer to this, but I know that it's a journey, and we need more people. Like imagine you wear pink. If there were 20 people who came with you and they wore pink, then that will become a norm, and everyone who wears blue will be people who are breaking the norm, right? I think normal is the biggest stereotype, Vikram. The biggest stereotype is normal. There is nothing called normal in this world, right? So we all want our children to be extraordinary, right? We want our children to be first. No one wants our children to be mediocre. Oh, the person is failing, it's all right. We don't say that. So when it comes to excellence, we want all our children to be abnormally very good, right? But when it comes to life and basics of life, we want all children to fit into our idea of normal. Normal is the biggest stereotype, and everyone should dread being normal.
Boy, am I glad I'm extremely abnormal in my approach. Thank you, Harish. That helps us, that has a sense of freedom, that thought, to think that you don't have to confine yourself in thought, in word, in action, to anything. There are really no boundaries if you think about it. And it's great when everyone resonates that thought. Fantastic. Thank you very much. I hope that answers your question.
Aparna, can I add something to this?
Absolutely,
Sourav. So my daughter, she hates pink. Like she just can't stand pink, and she does not like dolls. And every time I walk into any store, and whenever, so first they'll observe very closely if she has long hair or short hair. So luckily she now has long hair. With kids, it's difficult to make out, right? Whether it's a girl or a boy sometimes. And the moment they see a long hair, immediately they'll bring out all the toys and she'll like, yeah, I don't want. So there are people who would like say, oh, she's a little tomboyish. Some of these terms that, girls who do not, I mean, she's extremely feminine in other things. She is very feminine. And even if she is not, I give a damn. But the thing is that this entire definition of boys, blue and pink, it was created by us, right? I mean, that guy in the store, he's teaching her every time that she walks in that, you're supposed to like dolls and you're supposed to like pink. And she's opposing that. Now, here's where we are at a very interesting intersection. Our kids are progressing. And probably, as Harish said, they've never had a bias. We need to help them. We need to vehemently oppose such things when it's happening and educate that people. Not being rude, but telling them in a very direct, no-nonsense way that it's not necessary that girls will love pinks and girls will play with dolls. Girls can play with guns too, and they can love blacks and reds and blues or any other color. It does not matter. I think that is something that should come from us. And I think Harish mentioned this, that all of us are judgmental. Very recently, we had an incident of someone who's a teacher and a trainer, body shaming someone on that person's not having hair. And we as a, we vehemently stood up for that person and we opposed that. And what it would definitely create is a deterrence. Next time that person would be sensitive. I'm not saying that he will not be judgmental anymore. We cannot undo 40, 50, 60 years of conditioning and biases that's there in you. But every time we do this, it will be a deterrent. So he will not influence one more person. I think that's where, Vikram, I think we can probably make a difference. We have to speak up here. We have to tell people that, this is not right. I mean, we just can't be nice to one person and then make a nasty society.
Yes. So just adding to that, Delshad, you want to say something?
Yeah, you want to go ahead?
So just a little story about the pink and blue. You know what? There was a time when pink was considered a masculine color and blue was considered a feminine color. Yeah. And it so happened that someone said, why only men? And they took on pink. And that's the irony of the idea, because we start off something without knowing why we are doing it. And that is what happens. So with that, Delshad, do you want to add something?
Yeah, so I was just saying, I agree with Harish and Sourav. If we weren't judgmental as a species, we wouldn't have survived, because judgment started as an evolutionary process. If you could not judge, if you could not take spot decisions, fight or flight, right? That's a decision, and you take it based on judgment. So this is not about, your 30, 40 or 50 years of living. It is an evolutionary process. So you can't just get over it like that, what if we are not judgmental? Judgments will be there. Like everything is a judgment, right? Which laptop should I buy is you judge, based on certain factors and you buy it. So, I mean, judgment will stay. Judgment is here to actually help us. It's here to actually make us survive. But your judgment impacting someone else and ruining somebody else's life, that is where the mistake is. That is where we go wrong. So as Harish rightly said, judgment cannot be taken off. But if you want to start, if you are feeling judged, and if you are feeling insulted, if you are feeling to be made inferior by somebody else, the best place to start would be with you. So the best place to, you can't really impact or change somebody else. You need to see if you are doing that to someone else also in some way or the other. You might be, I'm not saying that the person doing it to you, you may have done something wrong to him and therefore he or she is reciprocating. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, start with yourself. Begin with the biases that you hold. Take a deep look inside and see that probably, you could be biased too about some other things. It may not be about the color of your shirt, or it may not be about, how you dress. It could be about 10 other things. So that's, once you realize that you are also biased about certain things, begin by changing yourself. When you begin by changing yourself, you gain the courage, you gain the guts, you gain the gumption to what Sourav was saying, that we need to speak up. That gumption comes in only when you can stand up and say, listen, I am not judgmental of so-and-so, or, I don't ruin someone's life by saying, this person is bald, or this person is fat, or this person is dark, or this person is short. If I'm not doing that, then
Delshad, are you with us? Well, I think we lost Delshad.
Yes. No, I think her video is stuck. Yeah. Probably this.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, she's back.
Can you hear me? Oh, okay,
yes,
okay,
yes.
okay. I'm so sorry. All right. So, like I was saying, it starts with us. It starts with a deep awareness, a deep introspection of the biases that we hold. And when we begin to I won't say get over the biases, but when we begin to realize that we are biased too and make a conscious effort not to hurt the other person, that's when we gain the courage and the gumption to fight back when someone says something to us. So that's what I wanted to share. It starts with us.
Thank you. There are so many aspects to this. It's never really just about inclusion. It's so much deeper, so much more. And wow, this is a lot of food for thought to go back. I think I'm going to take a few days to actually process what I've learned here in the last 60 minutes. So with that, oh, by the way, we'd like to welcome Preeti's kid to the meeting. We are very glad you're here. And we'd encourage all of you to bring your kids as well. So with that, Sri Lakshmi, we'd like to take your next question.
A few days back, I had a conversation regarding this topic with my friend who is in South Africa regarding lesbian or gay marriage. She is telling. One day I told her, if my son or a daughter in future, if he or she is a gay or a lesbian, I told her, as a mother, I will accept it from bottom of the heart. How will I accept as a heterosexual marriage? Similarly, as a mother, I will accept gay or a lesbian marriage. I want my kids' happiness, not by gender basis. This is the thing I want to tell.
You know what, since you mentioned that, I would probably like to point out this one interesting thing about Harish's mom. Harish is quite famous for another thing. His mother is equally famous. There was a matrimonial ad that I think your mother had placed for you a few years ago. I had read about it and I was like, what a woman. And can you think about it? It is so important for parents to have that complete acceptance, because you're only going to make their life hell if you don't do it. So thank you very much for bringing that out, Sri Lakshmi. You're going to be a fantastic parent. So next question, I think Deepshika's had a hand raised for a while. So Deepshika, we'd like to take your question, please.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Once again, good morning to everyone. I can't tell you how overwhelming this session has been. And one thing which I'm really very happy about is I had a test today and I'm so glad it got cancelled and I could attend this meeting. I guess this is by far the best meeting I would have attended, and this is not a question actually. I'm using this forum to request to both our panelists, and maybe it's already there, and if it is, please enlighten me. As we, through these questions, or this discussion, we realize it's parental conditioning, it is education, or be it, cultural bias. That's why we are facing all these things. And all of you are saying we need to sensitize maybe our households first, then our offices, then our schools. Are we using social media to its complete potential? If we can show ads about condoms, sanitary pads, why are we not showing these small clips? I guess they are going to have a huge impact. And you don't have to have a curriculum for that. We can just have a small ad. I know people are not, going out about issues which I said. People aren't going very comfortably to ask about condom, but now it has changed your mindset. I personally have spoken to people who have done this. Please, if we are doing about it, I would really like to know how it has been.
There is a lot of awareness, and there are ads that are coming up. Thank you for asking this question, Deepshika. I think we can take one. The onus of inclusion lies on those who are included. So can we take a thing from this, because every meeting needs to have some action point. So can the Gabbys Toastmasters Club, Felix, Natalis, the 50th Toastmaster event, can we all take the responsibility of making that ad right now about our children? Let's take that responsibility. Let's make that ad. Let's make an ad about, say, just each one of you on what you understood from this and how will you treat your children after this. Just make a 1-minute video, get somebody to aggregate it, put all of that together, that becomes an ad. Let's have that as an action point.
Why not? That's a brilliant idea. So if we don't want things to stop in these 90 minutes or 120 minutes and really want this to go on for a long time, create waves and not just ripples, let's do that ad. Why not? So yes, Harish, thanks for that fantastic idea. I think we have something brewing there, Sourav. We will have to think about this and get this going.
And as a start, as with all our meetings, this meeting is also going to be on our Facebook page. So we will be telecasting. We can't telecast it live because of technical issues, but then we will be putting this recording, this video out for the world to watch and get educated about this, because a lot of insightful discussions happened today. So that will be one start from the Gabbys side.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Aparna, can I say something to Deepshika? What I have seen happen over the past few years is a lot of corporates, a lot of even traditional businesses are today coming out with LGBTQ friendly ads. They are embracing the community like never before, even if they are doing it for bottom lines and profits. Now, let me clarify that when I say bottom lines and profits, the LGBT community is very small to make a dent to a large MNC. right? So even when they say they are LGBTQ friendly, what they are doing is making ads which are watched by all. It's not that they are being watched only by that community. And how you make a dent is, not only are you impacting the people who are watching the ad, you're saying that you are inclusive, but you're impacting the, let's say 1% or 2% of your population belongs to the queer community. It's the 98% who are also watching. So when at least 45 to 50% of that 98% is LGBTQ friendly, they see a company in you which is also inclusive. Tomorrow, when they have to go in for a product, if they have to choose between two, they would probably subconsciously be impacted by the fact that you stand by their values as well. And that's how the bottom lines get impacted. So a lot of corporates are now coming forward and declaring that they are LGBTQ friendly through their external communications, which is all these ads. This is happening. That's point one. Point two, a lot of allies, a lot of people from the community have social media pages, and they are promoting LGBTQ friendly content on that. So that's a movement that is happening parallelly. Youngsters are probably more privy to it on Instagram and all of that. Sadly, however, when it comes to ads, when it comes to the government, right, we don't see much of that happening. And here I would again like to bring in Section 377. When that was in question and when the government was asked to submit its case, the Supreme Court had given an opportunity to the government itself. The government chose to remain neutral. It said, we will go with whatever you decide. It gave Supreme Court all authority. While that was okay, the decision was left to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court fortunately took a very wise and sane decision. But unfortunately, the underlying subtext to it is, we are neutral, we are not taking a stand, which is why the ads that matter and the reach that matters through DD, which goes to every village, which goes to every nook and corner, those mediums are not showing these kind of ads. The government still sitting on the fence, still saying, oh, we are neutral. Supreme Court has accepted it. Okay, fine. These kind of changes, if you really want them to penetrate deep down into society, society won't be penetrated so much with an Instagram or a Facebook as much as probably a DD or an AIR. So until and unless we have this kind of visibility happening there, and with the government's acceptance, with the government's acknowledgement, these kind of movements will just remain limited to, the urban centers or people who are privy to the internet. In spite of being a country with maximum number of handsets, with maximum number of internet connections, we still are largely a poor country. We still are a country which, in the villages, in your furthest nook and cranny, depends on AIR or DD. And until they show these ads, we're not going to have full, complete acceptance. We're not going to be talking about it in those households. We may end up talking about it in urban or semi-urban households, but not beyond that. So over there, I really feel the government still has a long way to go. You remember, Aparna, we were discussing about the AIDS campaign. So when the government realized that AIDS had become a crisis, the government started having these campaigns which said, छूने से तो प्यार फैलता है, छूने से AIDS नहीं फैलता, छूने से प्यार फैलता है, ठीक है? And these campaigns had an impact. They went down to the last person in the village, and people realized that we don't have to discriminate. We don't have to make the person sit aside. You can hug the person, you can talk to the person, you can eat with the person. AIDS does not spread that way. If they could do it then, they can still do it now. But I don't see a very strong will as far as the government is concerned. And they have the maximum reach in terms of reaching to the last man all over India. So that's one area I feel our ads still lack.
But I guess if the movements start coming from the mainstream, the government can't stay back for long. And that is what Harish is trying to do here, start a movement here of sorts. Every little drop gets together and then makes the ocean. So let's start here and let's do that. So if you notice, we actually have in the chat, we've actually started asking people to mail us their clips, and a few of them have already volunteered. I will be sending my clip and everyone's going to be sending. So you will see that ad. We will tag you, Harish. I will make sure we do so that you can see that ad we create. Fantastic. So this brings us to the end of, I wouldn't say a panel discussion. I think the beginning of a movement.
Aparna, I think Preeti has a question.
Yeah, Preeti had a question.
Preeti, and also I think Inderjeet.
I think Suresh also had a question. Okay, so
Yeah.
can we take a
few
couple of more questions, panelists? Yeah. Okay, great. So yeah, Suresh, do you want to ask a question? I saw your hand raised and I saw you pinging me here. So are you there with us?
Just give me a minute. Let me unmute.
No, I don't think he's with us here. So in that case, let's go ahead with Preeti's question. Preeti.
He's here. He's here.
He's here?
Yes,
Okay,
you
so
can
Suresh,
unmute him.
Suresh, unmute Suresh, please.
Just give me a minute.
Sure.
Okay, no, I think he's not here. Maybe you can move to Preeti.
He's here.
Okay, so let's quickly take the question from Preeti. Yeah, and then when Suresh is back.
I'm here, I'm back.
Oh, awesome. Suresh.
I'm sorry. Okay.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
All right. Okay. My question is this. Is coming out of the closet, is it necessary? And how important is it to declare one's sexual proclivities to one's family and to the world in general? And another question, which is part of my main question is it a good thing to come out at all? And how safe is it? And or will it be like going from frying pan to fire? Any one of your panelists can take this.
Can I take that?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I think coming out is a journey. It's not a destination. Okay. So how you choose to come out first, when you speak about coming out, it's often seen as something that's external, right? We're coming out to people. But many a times coming out is also about coming out to yourself. So that's the first step of the journey. I know that some people don't have the privilege of coming out. You might be in a village that practices Khap Panchayat, where you could possibly get killed for loving somebody of the other gender, but if the person happens to be of the same gotra, right? So in that thing, if you're actually saying that I'm actually loving somebody of the same gender, it's going to be even more challenging. So coming out is a privilege. Coming out to the world is a privilege in many places, but at least can we foster a world where you can come out to yourself. And organizations, corporates need to be called out when they don't foster inclusion in their bodies. So one is creating an enabling environment outside, which everyone needs to take onus, but some geographies might have challenges. We need to be cognizant of that also. But coming out to yourself to begin that journey from within is paramount.
I hope that answers your question, Toastmaster Suresh. Okay, with that, let's take our question from Preeti. Preeti, is the question from Preeti or Preeti's kid?
I would like to ask the question.
Absolutely. And maybe know your name, please?
Sure. So my name is Shrey. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm not a part of the community, but I do consider myself to be an ally. My question lies regarding queer media and how the representation of the community on, say, movies and shows in the coming age is definitely increased from what we saw before. But from what I've seen, I still think it's very minimal. And we always see just one couple from the community. And I feel all of this is only for the sake of inclusiveness and for the title of the show being inclusive. And in addition, I just feel every time there is a couple, they only overemphasize on the struggles of the couple from the community rather than treating it like a normal relationship. So how do you think queer media and shows and say Netflix, for example, has to go about it in the development? Because I feel, especially with my generation, Netflix and shows like this have huge influence on how we think about and how we tackle high school, for example. So how do you think they can go about inclusiveness in queer media?
Harish, Delshad, or Sourav, who would like to go for this question? Delshad, yeah, sure.
So, sorry, I forgot his name. Sourav, right?
Shrey.
So Shrey, to begin with, you are a generation which is fortunate to even have content that has a lot of queer representation, right? We grew up in times which the issue itself was taboo, leave alone having content, that showed that. A start has to be made somewhere. And in fact, I am very grateful to these OTT platforms that they have brought this issue to the dinner table. And like you rightly mentioned, your generation does get impacted with shows like these, right? So unless the show is entirely about the queer community, the representation will be minimal, because that's the way representation in the society is. The community is considered a minority for a reason. So when you have like 10 main characters and you have one couple, I would say that's good enough representation to begin with in the first place. What we should be happy about, I don't think is the numbers, but the fact that now gradually they are being represented the way they are. Unlike earlier, where even if there was a representation, it was very stereotypical. Very, very stereotypical. So you would have a gay who's extremely flamboyant, who's extremely effeminate, and he would always be after the hero. He would always be the heroine's friend, always trying to patao the hero, line marify the hero. We've come a long way from there. We've come a real long way from there. There are movies being made about the queer community, with, even if they are not made with mainstream actors, they're made with fantastic actors who tell real stories. So, that's where the focus should lie. It doesn't matter. The numbers don't matter. So out of those 10 characters, I don't want all 10 to be necessarily queer. But the fact that they're showing one queer couple and they're showing their fights, their struggles, they're showing how they normally are, I think that itself is we've moved by leaps and bounds in the way we represent the community in mainstream media. That was not the case earlier. You had a lot of talking about lesbians. I mean, you probably weren't even born then when Fire released. When Nandita Das and Shabana Azmi did Fire, theaters caught fire. And I'm not joking. Theaters were burnt who screened the movie. Theaters were threatened if they dared to screen that particular movie. There were death threats against the actors just because they showed a lesbian couple in the movie, right? So coming from there to today, where we are actually talking about, this serial has a lesbian couple, or this serial has a gay couple, or this serial has a transgender, I think we've come a long way. Your generation could probably take it further, but I am really happy today the way mainstream media is now changing the way the community is viewed. Yeah? Large-scale Bollywood still needs to learn a lot. But thanks to OTT platforms, we are getting somewhere. We are now talking about the issue. We are showing the issue the way it is, and not, masking it with over-the-top stereotypes. That's my take.
So one thing I would want to add here, slightly different, I would say, is that one thing is also important is that the way we are showing the LGBTQ community in the mainstream movies also, it's two types, right? One, we are either making it more like a soft porn, more like an erotica, and which is why that while one section of the society went on burning theaters, when Fire was released, the other section of the society was buying tickets in blacks because, oh my God, Nandita Das, oh my God, that's a lesbian movie. Wow, great to watch, right? I mean, that's one. The other side of it is where you typically have the stereotyping and you make fun of gay people in the mainstream Bollywood movies. The maturity which I think is coming up slowly is, and I think this is how you wanted it and you desired, but I think there's right steps happening. So there's a movie called Samo. It's a Bengali movie, but available with subtitles. I would request you to search it up and watch it. It's one of those very mature movies where the queer relationships are shown in a way like it is a normal relationship. There's nothing abnormal about it. I think we have to detach all the erotica and all the humor and all those things from it and just show it as it is. How would you show a man and a woman being in love? You can show a man and a man being in love, a woman and a woman being in love, and that's perfectly okay. The other big difference I've noticed, if you go to some of these these websites like unsplash.com or pixels.com, you would see now where you can download high resolution pictures. You would see now that there are exclusive pictures on homosexual couples. So you can actually, so when you type love there, you can try it out. Go to unsplash.com, and if you type love, along with pictures of you seeing a man and a woman holding hand, you will also see pictures of a man and a man holding hand, a woman and a woman sitting together. I think there is some major progress happening that is very enlightening, and that's very encouraging in my opinion.
Fantastic. Honestly, Shrey, I envy the clarity that your generation has, because I genuinely sense the gap that's there. I don't even think I had the courage to speak about these matters at that time, leave alone the knowledge.
Just to add to all what Sourav and Delshad was saying, Shrey, also our frames of reference is different, because we have lived in two different generations. We have seen that and we have seen here. So we have a frame of reference which is very different from the frame of reference that you are having. So we rely on you to make your generation to make those movies. Like, for instance, if you look at Made in Heaven, right? In Made in Heaven, they didn't show the LGBT, they didn't show Arjun Mathur's character as just the person. I'm actually in a cafe and I'm drinking something as well. So pardon me for the disturbance. So the frame of reference, so they showed Arjun Mathur could be a liar. Okay. They showed that the intersex person in the Saif Ali Khan series, okay, that she was an intersex person. And that intersex person was just they showed that she was actually actually somebody who was not somebody who's a very white character. It was a gray character, right? So that becomes important, that we are not this very sweet, very nice. I love to see a gay criminal, a gay gangster, right? I would love to see a transgender. In fact, transgender gangster was already there. If we'd watched the old film called Sadak, that was already there, where you showed a transgender gangster, Sadashiv Amrapurkar. So I think our frames of reference are different, Shrey, and it's important. It's very good that you're not satisfied. You should not be satisfied. In fact, you should push people by not being satisfied so that they can do much more. So thank you. As we start graying and we become a little older, the old also have the responsibility to listen to the young and to not preach, but also get preached by the young. So thank you for preaching us.
Thank you so much. It takes a lot to make me feel inadequate, but after hearing that question, the clarity, I do feel inadequate. There's a lot to learn from each one of us here. So with that, we come to the end of probably a landmark meeting at the Gabbys, I would say, one of a kind, and we only hope it grows from here. I would like to thank the panelists for taking time out and answering and talking about it and bringing it out in the open. And please do forgive our ignorance if there were any, because we want to grow, and that is a sincere attempt here. Thank you very much, Harish Iyer. Thank you very much, Squadron Leader Delshad Master. Thank you very much, Toastmaster Sourav, and of course, thanks to Dr.Akkai, who's not here with us. So thank you all for gracing this occasion and opening up our minds to a better world. May the movement start. With that, I would like to ask for the certificates for the panelists. We have a quick soft copy certificate, and we want to take a picture and all the jazz. So just a moment, please. So there.
Thank you.
So can we take a picture of this, please? Yeah, thank you. Great. Next for Harish. Thank you very much, Harish, for joining us despite your long bus journey. I think we should all unmute and give them a big round of applause. It's the time to do that. Maybe unmute them all, please. And for Toastmaster Sourav as well. Thank you very much. Thank you all. And with this, we end our panel discussion. I hand it back to the presiding officer. Once again, thank you to the panelists from the bottom of my heart. Back to you, presiding officer, Toastmaster Nancy.
Thank you so much, our moderator, Toastmaster Aparna. I'm simply in loss of words. I really don't know what to say. I'm just feeling that how little I knew about all of this. I was having goosebumps as I was listening to you. I was thoroughly immersed into the session. I am not finding words to explain my feelings today. but I'm sure it was quite an insightful session. And it was not just me, all of us were wowed. I was looking at everyone's expression, and I think somebody has rightly mentioned this was by far the best meeting we have had. I echo everyone's thoughts. Thank you for being here, and a vote of thanks to Toastmaster Aparna for taking the initiative of this session, our VP PR Toastmaster Lakshmi for all the PR, for working day and night, Toastmaster Sourav for getting us the contacts, Toastmaster Sushmita for doing the PR at the back end. You know, some people don't show up, but they are our allies. And Toastmaster Jayashmita, I'm not sure whether she's here or not, but she has been really helpful. And each and every one of you for being here. I'm sure I'll be missing some of the names. Pardon me for that, but I'm grateful to each one of you for being here. And it was by far the best meeting for me and for each one of you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. With this, I close this meeting.
Nancy, before we all leave, can we click a quick picture? Can I request all of you to please come on camera?
Yes. That's our VP PR at work. Of course we can. Everyone, turn on your happy faces.
And if you're okay, please have a little heart emoji on your screen. On the screen to go. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Officers, can you please stay back?
Sure. Thank you, Harish. Thank you, Delshad.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Harish. Bye. See you. Thank you.
Thank you, guests.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Have a nice weekend.
Should we join back
You
on
too,
the Gabbys
Deepika.
account?
Toastmaster Vinod,
Just stop
you
the
want to say
recording.
something?
Just stop the recording. Yeah,
Okay.
Toastmaster Vinod.
Yeah, just I was thanking for the session. Really,